Welcome to this video on creating an Alces Flight HPC compute cluster from AWS Marketplace. We're going to be creating an 8-node cluster here today and looking at how we can access it from our desktop system. Before we get started, make sure you have the prerequisites for accessing your cluster. Firstly, get yourself an account on Amazon Web Services. This can be a single person account, or it can be a shared account as part of your business or institution. Your AWS account needs to be able to create instances and make new IAM roles. That's the default for new accounts, but you may need to ask your system administrator if you're accessing using somebody else's shared account. Secondly, get yourself set up with an SSH key pair for your AWS account in the region that you'll be using to launch your cluster. I've got one already set up in the Ireland region. That's where I'm going to be launching my cluster today. Thirdly, you'll need an SSH client installed on the system you'll be logging in from. If you have a Linux desktop or a Mac machine, SSH is built into those. If you have a Windows machine, you'll need to install one. I use the putty SSH client for Windows. To launch your cluster, log into your AWS account and navigate to AWS Marketplace. In the search bar, type in Alces Flight and press the Go button. Once you've found the product page for Alces Flight Compute cluster, review the product information by scrolling down your browser page. To launch your cluster, click on the Continue button, then select the Custom Launch tab in the next page. Scroll down the page, select the region where you want to launch your cluster. I'll be launching in Ireland. Click on the Personal HPC Compute Cluster button and then click Launch with the CloudFormation console. Amazon will automatically fill in the S3 link for the template you're creating. Click on the Next button to begin answering CloudFormation template questions. Now, the template comes with a number of questions that we need to answer so we can launch our cluster. The first question is the name that you want to create your cluster with. Now, this can be anything up to 16 characters long. I'm going to choose the name Scooby for my environment. Next, enter the amount that you want to pay for spot instances for compute nodes. This will be the maximum that you're charged for each compute node instance. If you enter a 0, the template will launch your compute nodes as on-demand instances. Your login node for the cluster is always launched as an on-demand instance through this template. Enter the number of US dollars, so I'm going to enter 95 cents per compute node. In the next box, select the type of compute node that you want to launch in your cluster. They're grouped into compute nodes, which have 2 GB of memory per core, balance nodes, which have 4 GB, memory-specific nodes that have 8 GB of memory per core, and there's a GPU instance that has an NVIDIA grid card as well. Each of the items is listed with the Amazon instance type, so you can look up the number of cores and the amount of memory. The dedicated types also have a dedicated 10 gigabit Ethernet network interface for the nodes as well. I'm going to select the C4 8X large instance that has a dedicated 10 gigabit card. All of our compute nodes are generated as the same type. I don't have any customization options at this time, so I'm going to enter how many nodes I want my cluster to start with. This will set the size of the cluster when it's initially launched. I'm going to select an 8-node cluster. The system will auto-scale from this value up to the maximum number that you specify below for compute nodes. If you enter 0 in this box, the cluster will automatically start with all nodes available and disable auto-scaling. In the key pair box, select the key pair that you want to use for your region. I'm running in Ireland here, and I've got an AWS Ireland key pair ready to go. In the next box, enter your login node disk size. This controls the amount of storage available on your personal cluster for shared storage. So applications and your user data need to live in here. I'm going to choose the default of 500 gigabytes here. That's created as an EBS volume and attached to my login node. In the next box, I can select my login node type. So that's a small T series, a medium R series, or a large C4. I want a fairly large instance here. I'm going to set the maximum size of my cluster to 8 compute nodes. In the next box, I need to enter the access details that I'm going to connect to the cluster from. I want to open this cluster to everywhere on the internet, so I want to be able to log into anywhere. So I'm going to enter the value 0000/0, and in the last box I'm going to select the default username of Alces to connect to my cluster. You can, after you've pressed the next button, set any tags that you want for your cluster. This allows you to find your compute nodes and login nodes in the Amazon console afterwards. I'm not going to set any here. On the review page, you can look at all the options that you've set. At the bottom of the review page, you need to confirm that you're going to allow the AWS CloudFormation system to create you this cluster, including an IAM role for reporting of the cluster status. Once you've checked the box, click on the Create button, and Amazon will go and start the creation of your environment. After a few minutes, the AWS console will refresh to show you the creation progress. This might take a couple of minutes if it's a small environment, or might take up to 5 to 10 minutes if you've requested spot instances as well. Once you see the Create Complete message in the status, you can click on the Outputs tab to find the username and the public IP address of the login node for your cluster. This is how you will log into your new HPC cluster. To log into your cluster using a Windows client, you will need to use the username and SSH key that you launched your environment with. Using putty, the Windows SSH client, select the SSH menu in the left-hand side, click on the Auth button, and then click on Browse to find your Amazon key that you launched with. Once you've done that, go back to the top, enter your username and IP address that's shown in the Outputs tab of your CloudFormation template. So here mine is that IP. Click on the Open button. The system will prompt you because you've not seen this environment before. Click on the Yes button. The system will then log you in to the environment using your key. You'll get a message that says that auto scaling is either on or off, depending on what you configured, and you'll be logged on as your user to your compute cluster running on AWS. We can use the qhost command to look at the compute nodes that have launched, and we can see here we've got our 8 compute nodes, which are all C4 8x large. From the command prompt in your environment, you can use the pdsh command to run a command across all the compute nodes in the cluster. Use the group nodes to run on all the machines. We're going to here run the simple command uptime. That will log into all of your nodes, tell you a bit about your environment, and here it's showing that we're not currently running anything. Flight will automatically create a list of host names for your compute nodes. You can look at those using the node attra command with an S for a space, a C for a comma between them, and an N for a new line between your host names. Once you've logged into the environment using your key, SSH is set up to automatically allow you to log in between compute nodes without a password. You can also use the sudo command to get root access on your login node, and equally on your compute nodes. Now you have your compute cluster environment up and running, watch the other videos in the series for getting a graphical desktop session, installing graphical applications, using the job scheduler, and running your applications across your cluster. When you've finished with your environment, you can shut it down using the AWS console page. Select the stack that you created in the CloudFormation console, In the Actions menu, select Delete Stack. You can then press the Delete button and AWS will automatically clear up, shut down your compute and login nodes and remove any resources that you've created. It's important for you to make sure that any data, anything that you want to keep off the environment has been copied off back to your local workstation or safely checked into an S3 bucket before you close your stack down. That concludes this video. Please watch the other videos in the series for more information about using your cluster and running applications through the job scheduler. To find documentation online, just go to our website, alces-flight.com. Click on the documentation link. That will give you all the printed documentation for using the system.